compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those that understand it earn it, those that don't pay it. And it's also true here. So I'm not saying that the Big Mac meal example would result in a bad outcome for me, but let's say I do something that's detrimental to my health. I just take a pound of lard and a pound of sugar and I eat that every day, 3 times a day for a year, and that's it. I think I'm pretty safe to say the outcome's going to be, so then I'm paying compound interest. And if I do something else, I'm earning it. And I believe that's the case with a moderate, sensible amount of these practices on a regular basis. You build that compound interest.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Wiser Together. This is your host Parmeet Kumar with your co-host Anas Pasha. Today we have a very lovely guest here today, good friend of mine, Jules, who's also a level 3 Wim Hof instructor. Level 1 Wim Hof instructor. We'll get into it. Right off the bat, I just want to ask Jules, what is the Wim Hof method and why is it important?
Well, firstly, I'll say thanks very much, Parmeet and Anas, for having me on. I've listened to a few of your shows and I love what you do, so I appreciate being invited. Yeah, so the Wim Hof Method it's built essentially on 3 pillars. One is controlled, focused breathing practices. Another is gradual cold exposure. And then the third is mindset, which really overlaps those other 2 and assists you having the right mindset in taking yourself through those things. In terms of the first 2, the physiology is key, and it's really about tapping into your autonomic nervous system. So enabling you to actually influence the chemistry, the biochemistry within your body by how you're breathing and by going into the cold. There's so many aspects to it, but quite simply, key central to the method is creating intentional short-term but beneficial stresses. So put a short-term stressor on your system, both by the breathing and by the cold exposure, that challenges your body and starts to create adaptions to happen, positive adaptions in your body. And the way I describe it is essentially it makes normal easier. So to use a rough analogy, if you think about when you see sprinters who run the 100-meter race, in training, they'll do all sorts, but one of the things they may do is tie something around their waist, either a resistance band or in some videos, you'll see people running with a big tire behind them. And of course, they don't do that when they're running the 100 meters, but to do that in practice, your body adapts to become stronger, to make you exert more power.
Like some people do ankle weights.
Yeah, and you take that thing off and then normal is easier. And so it's that kind of concept.
Similar concept where you're putting yourself in stressful situation voluntarily.
Correct, yes.
So you're better adaptive to involuntary
Exactly.
stressors.
And the term that is used, or the scientific term, is hormetic stress, the principle of hormesis for that type of stressor. Yeah.
Jules, it was really curious to me because Parmeet was the one who introduced this entire idea to me in the world of Wim Hof that you can say that we live in. Because of your background as well, as you mentioned that you've been into finance and quite a lot for a while, I wanted to understand the first instance when you heard that breathing and some physiological changes can bring about so much positive influence in your life. Did you dismiss the entire Wim Hof method at first and required more proof and more studying into it? Or what was your reaction? Like, did you accept it at first hand? How did you go about your journey?
So, no, I didn't dismiss it, but I was highly skeptical. I definitely know that. And I came to it probably about 7 years ago. And I've trained a lot in different things over time. I did martial arts when I was younger, a lot younger. For the last, say, 11, 12 years, I've been doing boxing and at times playing football, but boxing has been a regular thing for me. And I came to it from that perspective, really from the sports performance perspective. And I would find that no matter how fit I was, there's always this challenge. If you're performing at your own personal optimal level or best level, you're pushing yourself, you're going to find yourself getting gassed, exhaustion, feeling like you're on the edge of, I need to push it a bit more, but can I keep going? I know they're similar but different. If you're running a marathon,
Out of oxygen.
or if you're running whether it's the 400 meters and the last 100 meters is incredibly nasty, or you're running a marathon and the last several kilometers are nasty. How do you keep yourself going and push through? And in my case, you go a couple of rounds, and if you're going very vigorously, you become exhausted. So can you push through that? Is there something that can give you an extra boost? And so I heard about Wim Hof Method, and I began to practice only the breathing to begin with, not the cold. And I wasn't hugely skeptical, but I didn't think it was going to make a dramatic difference to me. But I thought, why not give it a go? I knew it involved breathing and some breath holding as far as I could see. And I've done a fair bit of practicing holding my breath before, not for the purpose of becoming fit or anything. But so I started to do it, and very quickly, immediately, and as you may have done and as other people have done, I looked at some of the videos of Wim talking to other people, some celebrities he talked to, interviews he'd done, documentaries, and I watched that, and I combined that with looking at the guidance from Wim Hof Method company, Inner Fire, as it's called. But Wim Hof Method, their website is wimhofmethod.com. And yeah, so I started to practice those, and immediately, even in the first session, it's not like you've had some massive upgrade of your physiology, but in the first session, you notice that something is happening. You don't know whether is this good or bad, but it feels good. But something is happening that you are influencing your system. It's true that happens. Now, separate thing is there proof that this helps me in sports performance? As
this is obviously your personal at the
my
time.
personal experience, and everyone's may be different. But so first of all, I said, wow, something about this. I don't dismiss this because something is good. And I continue to practice it then daily.
The breathing.
Daily, and it doesn't take too long to do on a daily basis. You can do it for a long period of time, but you can do what you need to do in a relatively shorter period of time. And so I honestly found there was some benefit for the purpose that I was doing it. Endurance.
Yeah.
And I would describe it like if you're running the concept of a second wind. Obviously, when I grew up, that was a term that was often used if you're running a cross-country run or something, and the PE teachers, the PE teachers are telling you you'll get your second wind or whatever, or you could say,
is that when you're out of breath?
And you're knackered, you have a stitch, and then sometimes you go through that, like going through the sound barrier. The plane's like in real trouble, and then it's all smooth.
Yes.
Sometimes that would happen. Sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes it would be the opposite. But when that happens, you go, wow, I got my second wind. This to me was like, this can happen with regularity. You can push beyond the boundary.
Incredible.
And to start with, you're not really controlling it and defining it. It's something that you go, I don't know, the capacity is just a bit better. But I definitely found that. It seemed like I had a little bit more, once you become exhausted, okay, in my example, in boxing, it could be in any sport, the hands start to drop, or you're then just relying on, I just need to keep breathing and keep my gut, sucking air or whatever.
I guess you're not as attentive.
And then all of the other, like Mike Tyson's famous quote, I paraphrase, he said something like, everyone has a game plan until they get punched in the face. Right?
Exactly.
Everyone has, until you're exhausted and you get gassed, and then you go, and your hands drop, or you're just trying to, just don't get hit or whatever.
Miss a footing, and
then all of your ideas, I can do these combinations, or I can feint
out of the window.
It goes out the window. And so, so that stuff disappeared less. You could still do some stuff with a bit more calmness and clarity, and then it increases, and you practice a bit more, and then I found that. So that was my first experience. Something is working about this for sure. I recognize. I felt like I had a bit more time. It's like, or if you're playing a field sport, I feel like I have more time on the ball, less panic. If you more in
control.
Yeah, and so that happened. And then in the first time I had a proper seminar with the Wim Hof group, Wim came to Sydney. March 2018, and I attended a session that he and others ran. And he gave a wonderful talk. He's very charismatic and inspirational about the history of it and what he'd done.
Yeah.
They also had a scientist from Melbourne Institute of Technology running through the science of it, which I found fascinating. And we did the breathing exercises, and they had the big ice baths out. It was nighttime. It was late at night.
Similar to the one I did? Was it
Yes,
same?
Yes. Okay. About 15 to 20 people
Park?
in each one. Yeah. and very cold. And that was the first time I'd done a proper ice bath, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I said to myself, I was already thinking, this something works about this. I like it.
Yeah.
After that, I said, okay, I'm into this. I'm all in. So. Then I started to do the cold showers as well myself. Yeah, and that was my intro to it. And then, you know, we could talk about, if you want to, the training about.
Just a little thing that I wanted to pick on. So for people listening to this, they might think that this might be placebo, but I just want to understand and get like a factual answer from you. You did experience physiological changes.
Yes, for sure. Now, what the exact science in me individually, what has happened? Some stuff I've actually measured and looked at and recorded. Other things not so, right? So could it be that those experiences I had back then were placebo effects? Oh, it's entirely possible, for sure.
Yeah.
Do I worry about it too much if it was? No, but I would like to think that there's science behind it. But it's possible there's some amount of placebo. You say, this thing makes me feel good, and I believe it's doing something good internally or physiologically, and therefore I'm going to perform better. Now, to some degree, there's also evidence in scientific studies that a positive expectancy can influence outcomes.
Yes.
People who are dramatically more optimistic and positive versus people who are negative and pessimistic, things tend to work out better.
Yeah.
You tend to find the path to the good.
Even with visualization, there's
So firstly, one is not entirely a negative thing if there is some placebo effect, but one of the things that I think that Wim and the Wim Hof sort of group, the WMFI, have really contributed to and done great things with, is influencing and encouraging a lot more scientific, proper academic research to be done on these sorts of things. And so I think it was a great vindication for Wim, some years ago, where the seminal works were done at Radboud University in the Netherlands with scientists, Cox and Pickers and others, who looked at, okay, what is going on physiologically within Wim when he does these practices. When we inject him with an endotoxin, he's able to alleviate the symptoms of headache, fatigue, nausea, illness that should arrive. And then further to that, then to say you're not just a one-off, because Wim emphasized this is trainable. And so then to repeat that experiment with a control set of 12 people who didn't do these practices and a 12 who did, and to show that the results took place with the 12 who did as well. So that was, and then subsequent to that, there have been many other studies, and then you start to see it pervades into all sorts of areas. So that related to immune response, attenuating your innate immune response. You don't get as much inflammation and swelling when your body starts to try and deal with something, and it becomes over the top. And then you sort of take that down a further path, and essentially autoimmune diseases are of that nature, right, where your immune response starts to be negative for you. But then other places, is there a role of this in other forms of more chronic inflammation? Maybe there's been some initial work on spondyloarthritis that was done in connection with the Wim Hof Method. And all of these studies are on the Wim Hof website, wimhofmethod.com. You can find the science behind it. And I can, if you want, I can touch. The thing for me is I have personal experience in various of these things.
Of course,
So I came to the method for sports performance. I found there's some benefit there. Just to touch on that as well, the concept of lung function, does it increase your lung capacity? I think there's a high probability that it does, but based on my personal experience.
But that's what breathing, like intentional breathing also
should do, If you exercise your diaphragm more.
Exactly.
And if you statistically or apparently, based on studies of people's breathing approach, people are using far too little of the full movement of their diaphragm to breathe generally. So if you're exercising your diaphragm, just like if you're not doing any load-bearing exercise, you won't be as strong as if you're doing sensible load-bearing exercise to make yourself stronger. If I want to be able to lift things better, something that I require a bicep movement for, I can do generalized exercise, which will be good for me, or I can isolate the muscle and do a bicep curl, which will be incrementally more effective for that purpose. Similarly for your respiratory system and your breathing muscle, your diaphragm, which also is important for your core stability. You're probably going to get good outcomes. So for me peak expiratory flow is a measurement you can test quite easily, blowing a rapid exhale.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that measurement is higher than it should be given my age and my height. You look at the tables. Now, is that because of the physical exercise? Surely that contributes to it, yes.
Of course.
But does the breathing assist? I can't prove it categorically, but my feeling, personal
It's
experience is
strong,
that it has helped, yeah.
I believe another thing for Wim is just like how crazy it is that he has a twin brother, Andre. And I'm just like picking on what you said, that it's strain but not genetic, because a lot of people might think that he might have like a genetic advantage, but this guy having a twin brother, and he couldn't do, and they have according to him they have 100% genetic mapping, right? And he couldn't do what he did, and that he had to also train him, and then Andre was able to do it. Was just like, it's destiny. It's just like a
Yeah.
perfect controlled subject,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Now, that I think is one of the wonderful things about it. Now, are some people going to achieve more things in a particular activity than others? Of course, there's gonna be some genetic things.
The hundreds of factors play into it.
Can I ever play basketball like Michael Jordan? I know categorically I cannot. But within that, and that's one of the things I think is really important with these sort of broad-based sort of health applications of methods like this, is to think about it not relative to the rest of the population, but relative to trying to assess what is 10 out of 10 for me, and what is 0 out of 10. Well, actually, where do I want to be? Because what am I capable of physiologically, for example, at this age? And in 20 years' time, what would I be capable of? Probably by default, it's less than today. But what is it? And is there any reason I shouldn't be able to do whatever that is? So I could still be, from my self-assessment, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Even though I might not be as able as the me 30 years prior or something. And so I think that's an important thing. And then secondly, do I want to be that or not? You don't have to. You could
Of course,
you could be late and say, I'm willing to compromise a bit of this in return for.
People do that, of course.
I can eat some biscuits or something which I wouldn't otherwise eat. Yes, but
biscuits is modest.
on biscuits and sugar, people say that contributes to inflammation. I'm not a doctor, and I can't categorically say those things. I can say how I feel after having eaten too much sugary containing things, and it's not great.
Of course.
But in terms of inflammation, what I can attest to is I've had, for example, multiple surgeries for hernia. I had a hernia repaired in the mid-90s. They repaired it with mesh, which is was and still is the standard practice. And subsequent to that, over many years now, there's been increasing cases of a thing called mesh inguinodenia, as inguinal hernia. We don't need to go into that, but I mean, a lot of people have suffered chronic pain from meshes, both from inguinal hernia and other types of uses of meshes. And I certainly did, and I had it for years. And then what was it? Almost a decade and a half later, I had the mesh removed, and I felt some relief. There's a compromise in terms of strength of the area, but relief. They found a nerve had been entrapped and stitched through with a stitch, and the mesh unfolded, and all this sort of stuff. The point is, that took place, so I had chronic pain for some time. Afterwards, I felt better, but when I tried to exert myself, I found I couldn't do as much as I used to be able to do because there's a weakness there. Your back takes up some of the strain. And so I said to myself, okay, I just have to, and it was quite confronting to say, no, versus other troubles that you could face in life, maybe it's trivial, but to say, I'm very active and I want to be able to run this, it's quite confronting. I have to accept I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to run 10 kilometers.
It is,
and what have I done fairly recently with one of my sons? Run 10 kilometers.
Oh, wow.
And I almost kept up with him. He's 15 years old, so it's hard, but he's just naturally very fit. But for many years now, I've restored a lot of the things. Why is that? Is it because of applying the Wim Hof method? I can't certifiably say because I haven't had scientific experiment on me to do it.
In your opinion, you can certainly.
Absolutely, yeah. For sure, I've returned to doing things that I wasn't able to do before. If I stop doing these things, the breathing, the cold exposure, I notice it, I miss it in terms of how I feel. So from an inflammation, old injuries, ailments, assisting with those things, my own personal experience is it helps as well. Physical fitness and that thing as well.
So essentially, it would help you with your immunity, inflammation, and these things have been obviously been tested already.
Yeah,
And people
so,
can do their own research, of course.
So there is research which Wim has sort of driven.
Yeah.
The experiments have either been done with him, in conjunction with him, but on the immune system response.
Yes.
I can say I've experienced that as well in terms of
Yeah.
the resilience to cold, sickness, flu, those sorts of things. When I had COVID, I had no symptoms. I know many people didn't, but
Yeah.
so maybe it's not due to that. But,
Obviously, it varies. Yeah.
yeah, but I would find if you start to have signs of a cold, you get the tickle in your nose or throat, or I will just ramp up. I do the breathing practices daily anyway.
Yeah.
I'll do them more solidly, and probably for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
To preempt, to shut that thing off before.
Yeah. I feel like when he initially came out with the method and he was making all these claims, he was a bit early in the world as well. Everybody found it to be a bit gimmicky because scientifically, the world as well wasn't, exposed to the idea of changing your physiological self just through breathing or these practices. And it sounds gimmicky if you initially look at it.
Yeah.
And that's everybody's first response. Like, how can breathing make you happy? Or how can it change your immune system and reduce inflammation and all of that? And for years and years, like, we've invested so much into pharmaceuticals, medicines, and this and that. Obviously, there's different reasons, capitalistic or lobbying reasons for that. But now I think the world is very more accepting of it. I've seen it a lot more as well, especially in the Western countries, and it's getting more common.
Yeah. And I don't think these things are black and white, because you can very quickly say, okay, it's all the natural way or nothing, and those sort of things. There's still a role there's a role for medicines and for surgeries and for all of that stuff. And wonderful things are done, which couldn't be done many years ago because of those things.
Yeah.
But just to say that there's a significant, my own personal view, and this partially comes from my biases, and I admittedly am biased, and so people should try and eliminate the bias that comes from me. But my own experience with surgeries, for example, is that, and I was a young guy when I did a lot of exercise, martial arts, football, some weights and stuff, and so the hernia was very mild. It wasn't really bothering. It was just like you could see something, but it was like, But you take things at face value, and I think it's a little bit crude and blasé, but I'll say it. The old adage, "Don't ask a barber if you need a haircut," right? So if you go to the person who's trained all their life and done medicine and specialized down into, okay, I do hernia repairs. How do you do them? I've followed this path, which is with mesh.
Right.
With all professions, there's different angles and paths, and once you've gone down one, you're going to support that path, right? So this is how I think you should do it. And I said, this person is an expert. You have this perception of it's infallible. And maybe it works for the majority of people. Maybe it doesn't. But without too much analysis and criticism or critiquing it, you'll do it. And so my own view now is that if there's any way to avoid surgery, intervention, those sort of things, I would do it first.
Yeah.
And then if you have to do it, you have to accept. And clearly there are some things where there's no other choice, right? And it's a wonderful thing that you can choose to have surgery for something. But
So I want to move on to, so initially you started this practice for athletic purposes, essentially. And then where did you have that shift from, okay, you started this for yourself and it is benefiting me, to going on to developing a sort of purpose wherein you wanted to devote yourself to educating other people of the method and helping them achieve or realize the similar benefits that you experienced? When did you have that shift?
I think it was, it was, I'd been practicing this a lot for myself. I'd found benefits from it, and I found they were more than the original reason that I started to try it. And like with many things, you start to do something, you think it's good, you'll tell people about it, and you'll say this is good, and
become an advocate.
You advocate it, and you want to see people do it because you go, no, people have said this will help you, it will help you. And then somewhere with that, I would be telling people and saying, this is how you do these things. And then I saw, okay, you can look at the Wim Hof Method Academy and become an instructor. And I thought, well, I love this thing. I want to do that. So I'm all in. I want to do as much as I can. So I signed up to that, and I did all of the online training and those sorts of things. It went off for some while, and then it was actually partially through COVID. There's that shutdown situation, and then eventually got to go to the final session of that training, the culmination of that training, you go over, in my case, to Poland for 5 days, and you finish up there.
So was it completed during COVID or after COVID?
That was so the training, the online training I did, and going through that, and so I had I've been practicing it for a long time, right? So the first part of the training is you revisit everything, and you start to align that with how would people absorb this and receive this in terms of teaching it? What are the applications of it? And there are many.
Yeah.
And then so that was during COVID. It's proper lockdown that I was doing that. And then the final stage where I went overseas, well, in the run up to that, we weren't sure if we were all going to be able to go to it. There was people from all around the world going to do this in Poland. We were. It was February 2022, and so by that stage, you were able to travel. So we flew into the Czech Republic.
So this was after COVID then. 22, you did the
February 22
practical training?
Yes, February 22,
okay.
yeah. So yeah, then you still had to be tested for COVID to return to Australia, for example. To go there, you had to do COVID tests and demonstrate.
Yeah.
So you were still doing that.
So a reason why I asked that was that, as you mentioned as well, like we've talked about the physiological changes. However, I wanted to dive into the mental changes as well, because Wim Hof says that you need to be just happy, strong, and healthy, and the rest is bullshit. I heard him say it in one of the things. So basically, during COVID as well, the world was locked down, it was uncertainty, and a lot of people suffered from negative mental health, right? So in your case example, in your anecdotal experience, what were the mental advantages that you took from it, if you did any?
And again, I would say my own personal experience is it has been very much a positive effect in that way. I would say that. Okay, so, and this is something that over time you realize a lot, and you have to start becoming more humble over time. Or you don't have to, but I certainly have, and it's been probably a good thing for me. But everybody has their challenges in life. Doesn't matter. Everybody.
Yeah.
Now, someone might be lucky, and most things go very smoothly and swimmingly, and it's possible. There's so many different paths.
Of course. Yeah.
But most people have something very challenging in their lives, or things. And then they may go good, and then something else may happen. Now, I've had mine. I've had my fair share, and I think, as I said earlier, it's all relative. You compare against someone else. Everything in my life may be trivial completely, and against other people it may be disastrous, and then everything in between. But I've had mine. So, with that, here's how I would put it. If I wasn't practicing the Wim Hof method, the things that I found extremely helpful and beneficial to me, I would be in a worse
that's a good way to look at it, actually,
than I am right now. And there's a mental aspect. There's also a physical aspect, and the both interact.
Yeah.
If you're physically unwell, then it exacerbates the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. And I've had my challenges through before that COVID period, subsequent to physical things like the hernia thing. That can be quite a problem. A physical thing can be a thing you mentally going, oh no, I can't do all this stuff I want to do. Then things in your personal life that happen that are challenges, self-inflicted things, non-self-inflicted things, whatever it may be. But I have found, and the other way I'd say it is that period of time you dedicate to it there's a sense of relief and relaxation and peace and calmness for people who practice yoga, pranayama, breathing, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Same thing. And that's why if I run a session with people in the Wim Hof method, and we're going to do the breathing thing, I say, you're in control of your own body. It's one of the things we emphasize is you're in control. Never force anything. One of the other things I say is the only thing I'll ask of you is to please shut out time after this and worrying about anything. This period of time, you've come and you're able to make this time, and only think in terms of this time whilst you're doing this, so that you can be completely relaxed, present, relaxed, no other stresses, and that way you better access the benefits it's giving you and that sense of relaxation and relief. And I think that's all important I'm sorry, it's very cliched. In today's world, there's too much stress, chronic stress, toxic stress, but there is. And I think if you were able to do a very wide scale experiment where you physiologically did readings of people's measurements of things like cortisol, for example, that's the poster child of stress, right? People talk about
stress hormone.
cortisol. The baseline level when I'm sitting here relaxed, supposedly not doing too much, for many people will be higher than it probably should be.
Okay.
Because it's been ingrained and set there by.
Are you saying over time, on a general basis, if you take an average level of stress, on average in the world that we live in, has it gone up over time?
I think
I would assume so.
It's theoretical. It's my hypothesis, but I think it's the case. And why is that? I think it's lifestyle. Lifestyle is a very broad term, and it captures everything. It captures your diet, the things that you eat and drink.
Pretty much everything.
It captures the activities you do. It captures what occupies your mind. It captures the responsibilities that you perceive or don't perceive.
People around you.
And your natural system of stress response is one that should allow you to be, and this is why the Wim Hof Method, there's a few things that are central to it, very important within it, I believe, that they emphasize. One of them is the autonomic nervous system and the branches of that, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Both are important, vital to us to operate well. And the balance between them. And I think that I think it's a truth that it's possible to have too much engaging of the sympathetic system in without you actually even meaning to, and driving cortisol levels up. Yeah. Now, in practicing breathing in itself, you voluntarily, purposefully, if you know what you're doing, you can take yourself into the sympathetic state for a certain reason, and it can be a good thing for a short-term stressor. But to have it there all the time in the background, when you're not meaning to, and because part of that is your breathing. Your breathing can inform your body that you're.
Cortisol isn't all bad. People look at it like just negative. It's very important in a lot of ways. It helps us wake up, get out of bed. Cortisol during the day is higher, like when you wake up, and then goes down throughout the day. And it's essentially what drives action, I would say.
Yeah, it's part of your stress response that's there, right? So ideally what should happen, as I understand when I look at the science, and again, I'm not a scientist, but is that your baseline level should be at a certain level, which is low, right?
At a certain level. Yeah.
When you encounter a stressful situation, and they've tested this by the best way they can test it artificially in a scientific way is with images or try to create a response. You should have a positive response, cortisol, adrenaline, spike up. And those are your body's natural way to deal with those things. And then it should be relatively short-lived, and then it goes back down. And if you look at people who have blunted responses for various reasons, you have a higher baseline, but then an underactive, blunted response when you most need it. And that is when people go towards other things to make them feel better.
I guess that is actually the case. For example, in men as well, we've seen the testosterone level. For example, in the 20th century, in the 19th centuries, for example, it has been like what it should be right now. It's decreased quite considerably, and it's been a significant drop. So definitely, I would say lifestyle changes and how easy life has become for everyone. I mean, owing to technology and how comfort is now. And this is, I believe, Wim Hof also says that we're born with it. We're born with the ability to do these things. But because we're not exposed to the cold and clothing and comfort and everything, we've lost that ability to connect with ourselves, connect with nature.
Yeah, and I think that's a really critical thing, and it goes across a lot of the applications of the Wim Hof method, and indeed whether you apply methods of yoga and and jumping in the cold or cold exposure in whatever way you want to do it. For example, that idea of sedentary lifestyle, no stress. One of the things that in the Wim Hof method training that they took us through, and you're reading some external papers that are scientifically driven, but they've sort of drawn attention to them, relates to the study of aging. And one of the concepts within that is this idea of what is the right level of stress. And so there's this idea of productive, optimal stress.
Yeah.
On the left-hand side, if you think of a graph, you can have no stress. If I sit on the couch all day, sedentary,
But that's not good, right?
yeah, it's no good because the body, as Anna said, your body becomes adapted to no stress. And so then apply some stress to that zero stress adapted body or mentality or whatever it is, it's hard to deal with. Yeah. And then at the opposite end of the scale on the right-hand side is toxic stress. Whereas if, I don't know, this is again a stereotype, cliche type thing, but someone who is going into the office every day and there's stressful situations, there's negative activity between people and constant, I don't know, sensation of pressure and all those things, that almost never goes away. And so,
have you faced that?
I haven't. I've faced what I would classify as just normal stresses, but that really comes from where, honestly, for me, I've been very lucky. My last 13 years, I worked at one privately owned investment management company, and I still I left there on very good terms to pursue my own business now. I'm still in touch with those people. I still invest with them.
Amazing.
It's wonderful. I think, and before that, a similar thing with a different company. In my career in working, I've experienced stress for sure. It can be very stressful at times, but that's where I'm voluntarily having a sense of responsibility for stuff, and I want to do it well. And it's almost impossible. It's not impossible, but it's very. The default situation is you're going to create stress on yourself when you go, I want to do this well, no, better than that. And there's a time frame and I have to do this. That comes now with hindsight, and in the latter part of that, these things have helped me. But with hindsight, we would have loved to have done these things a long time ago, because one of the key learnings.
Why is that?
Oh, well, because I could have had a more relaxed time in situations, I suppose. But one of the realizations I've had, which, it's hard to describe the evolution of a realization or a experience of something, but it's been actually very recent in the thing. I've been practicing these types of things for several years, but really only in the last, you start to articulate them, and you don't sit there and think and go, why is it, okay, it's this, it just
organically keep taking
it comes to mind, and then you realize, and then you haven't even put it into words, but then you start to put it into words because you do think about what you've been thinking about.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Only if you reflect on it, then you can articulate it.
And there's many of them. One that I'll give you, which I think, because it's quite succinct, is the idea of going into an ice bath. And you go into an ice bath, and let's say you often in Australia run these ice baths with a chiller, or you put ice into it, but it might be 4 or 5 degrees. I ran one yesterday. It was 2 degrees.
Yeah, you put us in 2 degrees.
2 to 3 degrees. Now, if it's done sensibly, it's perfectly safe, and you have to be sensible. But the point I want to make is anyone who gets into that ice bath, and I've stayed in those things for quite a long time, but I relax into it, and it becomes, I love the experience. But when I first get in, now I don't know about other Wim Hof Method instructors and other people, but when I first get in, I still feel my hands are,
of course,
very quickly, my hands are in pain, my feet are in pain, it's very cold. But then equally as quickly, I relax and go, accept that, because I know that it stays like that and then it dissipates. So it doesn't get worse. And
you do that consciously, right? That's a conscious effort that you put in to cope with that stress.
Well, after a while, it becomes, I just know what I have to do.
You get in a flow state that they call, maybe.
So there's different instructions that I would give to people, but the first one I would say is, if people haven't gone into it before, is that when you get in, your natural instinctive reaction for many people, I'd hazard for most people, is your face tightens up, your jaw clenches, your shoulders tense up, so there's tension and the stress. And
that's a natural response, right?
And my suggestion is that doing the opposite of that is ideal. Relax the shoulders, relax the eyes, relax the face, the whole thing, and just feel the feeling and know that is your relaxation. Relax into it and say, this is happening, and there'll be a dissipation in this. Now, you can't say that for every single negative situation you encounter in life, right? There's different things but for many things where it's a general, broad type of stress, or even an acute stress, first, not panicking is generally a good thing.
Exactly.
And not panicking sort of goes hand in hand with relaxing.
Yeah, awareness I think plays a big role. Like if you can identify it for what it is and
Yeah,
label it, and then it's more about, you can't avoid stress; they will come. It's inevitable. It's more about having a coping
yeah.
mechanism.
Now it also matters with the challenge that you're facing. What is the time frame of it? So if if I'm not really concentrating and I step onto the road and there's a bus coming, I don't relax into it.
Obviously,
I
that's you won't even get time.
step
That's
back
you
and then just go,
naturally,
oh,
yeah.
okay, and my heart rate will cover and breathe.
Yeah,
But if it's a realization, this thing's happened and I did this and I didn't prepare for that, so there's consequences of this which are not a split second, but they're more don't no, easier said than done.
of course,
But
practice.
but I think that's one thing I'd say to. I said this was going to be succinct. Sorry, and I've made it the opposite of that. But to say it is possible to relax into those things, and acceptance is an awareness and acceptance that there might be something non-ideal about it. But okay, what's the best thing you can do? And
I see. Jules, I wanted to ask you one thing personally. I did a month of cryotherapy. So just to give the context to the viewers, the cryotherapy that I did, and because I've seen it differs from place to place. The one that I did was one session for 3 minutes and 30 seconds at minus 140 degrees Celsius. So I wanted to take your thoughts on that. If you have tried, what you think about it. For me, I agree. My personal anecdote would be that I sort of got addicted to it. At first, it's like you are just in a place, like in a human-sized deep freezer. You're naked, just your boxes are there, and you're like, "What am I doing here?" But then after a minute, you're just like you relax into it, you ease into it, and when you come out of it, you just feel amazing. You just feel like there's like an aura to you. So my question would be, the physiological benefit of cold is cold is cold like, does it matter if you're in an ice bath or a cryotherapy or taking a cold shower in Iceland, for example?
the different modes by which you get the cold exposure.
Yeah,
I think well, you can, in principle, at the first level, it's cold, and you're exposed to it, and there is some commonality in the effect of it and what it's doing. So all of those things can be good. With the assumption that you're not doing things at a dangerous level. So you say minus 140. Obviously, when it's the air as opposed to a liquid, your body can tolerate a lot more, both on the upside and the downside, right? So you can't go into 100-degree water. You can go into 100-degree air temperature.
Yes.
And that's to do with your thermoneutral level. So in water, it's around your body temperature, 36, 37.
Yeah.
In the air, it's about 26, something like that. So I think all of them can be good. And first I must say the actual correct, accurate answer is I don't know, but I can tell you from my experience what I think. I would also encourage to get over time, people will probably study this scientifically. What's the effect of this thing versus this thing versus this thing? But my experience, I've done cryotherapy, but I've only done it one time. I thought it was important to see what it was like.
Yeah.
And it was a few years back, maybe 3 years ago or so. No, longer than that, longer. It was like 4 or 5 years ago. And it was very brief. I can't remember the temperature. I don't think it was as cold as your one, but it was definitely colder than you could go in water, obviously, because it was sub-zero. It was over very quickly, and so the intensity of the cold was definitely not as much as I get in the ice bath. Obviously, that is the cold air is in contact with your skin, but like the example with the air, your thermoneutral level, so you don't need as much in the water to get to the same level, that sort of thing. Is it as effective? I think it would be. I think you would have to make sure you didn't get overexposed to, because you can get frost burn effectively.
Yeah, cold burn.
Exactly. You want to be in for long enough to have the effect. Now, your description of it suggests that you were in for sufficient at that temperature.
Sufficient.
And I think the practitioner, and again, I'm hypothesizing here, I would encourage people to form their own opinion rather than mine, but particularly on this matter. But I would think it sounds like the practitioner getting the right balance between temperature and time is very important. I'm just thinking here.
Yeah.
But I am, again, my thing before, don't ask the barber if you need a haircut. Me being the barber, I'd say
Yes.
I like the cold because I know where I stand. I know there's tables you can look at. How long does it take at different temperatures for someone to become hypothermic? Those sorts of things. What is the outcome? And practical experience with it. You can also gain practical experience from going in a cryo chamber, but you want to make sure, with
Your extremities are covered.
all of these things, safety is an important consideration.
Yeah.
I
But for
understand.
me, I couldn't categorically say one is better than the other. I only know what I know, and that's the ice bath, the cold exposure. I can also say I take cold showers. I prefer to take an ice bath. If I've done a session, I did yesterday, hadn't reset up my ice bath, so I took a cold shower today. That's not as good as the ice bath for me because it's intermittent. There's some air and some water,
Obviously.
so it's not as complete.
It's not submerged. It's more like flowing, right?
Yeah. And in Australia, it's maybe not as difficult as in Dubai, but in Australia, still, in winter, it might be 11 or 12 degrees, the water coming out. It depends how your property is situated and where the tanks are. 11, 12 degrees is plenty cold enough to have a benefit for sure. In the summer, it's not quite as cold. So shower versus cold exposure, if you assume the same temperature, ice bath every time. But if you can't do it, which everyone can't, a cold shower is perfectly effective.
Because he mentioned that, Wim Hof also mentions that in his book that obviously the ideal scenario would be you taking an ice bath and you get the maximum amount of benefits there, but it's not to say like anything in that direction will bring you some sort of benefit. Obviously it would vary for different people. Wim Hof also says like, the goal ideally would be to get you to doing 2 minutes of ice bath, but that's the end goal. You don't need to start there. In the book, he says start with a cold shower, as cold as you can, and start with 5 seconds, 6 seconds. And that's how I personally started. Cold showers that was one thing I couldn't do before. And I started with 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and I never used to go fully cold. Whereas with practice, you would find it easier. It doesn't necessarily get easier, but you can cope with it easier. And essentially, with the concept is the same, right? You sort of taking on a form of, obviously there's different benefits, but psychologically, if you're taking on a form of voluntary suffering, and putting yourself through that, you will be better equipped to deal with involuntary suffering when it comes, which is inevitable. Which is with different things as well.
Yeah. I think that's very true. You make an important point as well. The way that the Wim Hof method is explained, and we're trained to explain it, is gradual cold exposure.
Yes, gradual.
You're not jumping in.
You don't want to shock the body.
You're not jumping into 1 degree water and staying for 10 minutes or something like that. It's gradual. And it might even be someone putting their hand in for a short while first to become familiar with that, because that's plenty. There's even a protocol for that, which is to have that experience, because the essential experience is, whether it's your hand or your body, it's safer with your hand to begin with, but your hand will still feel that unpleasant pain and those sorts of things. And then the realization as you and the way that's trained is to try to actually, it's called interoception, the sensation of what's going on internally.
It's basically
feel what's going on in there, in the hand and those sorts of things, and feel if can you sort of discern that there's a blood flow or not. And that may not be possible for everyone, but what also happens is you have so why is the cold exposure good? Whether it's cryotherapy, ice bath, or a cold shower, or going out in the cold air temperature if you're in a ski resort and
in Alaska,
and go out in your shorts and lie in the snow or whatever. Now, I'm not advocating people to do these things, right?
Course,
so safety first. But the point is, what happens what are the benefits? So we talked about there's a mental thing, there's a psychological thing, which is resilience to cold. And then you go on from there, resilience to pain, to stress, to other things like that, and a mindset and a thought process. This is where it comes into the mindset pillar. You're actually capable of a lot more than you think, physiologically, mentally, in many ways. So there's that aspect. There's also physiological things. You have a spike in dopamine which makes you feel good.
Yes, that's proven. That's
And
scientifically
you'll have a
proven.
spike in adrenaline and noradrenaline
Yeah.
in your body,
Yeah.
which can be helpful and productive. And again, that's a short-term intentional stressor. Also importantly, and this is the exact science on this is, I guess, not precisely studied, but there's papers on it for sure over quite a long period of time. But the notion that when you go into the cold, the response of your body is vasoconstriction, so your blood vessels tighten, close up, particularly
that's why blood pressure
in your periphery, to try to conserve the warm blood to your core for your vital organs, your brain. And so that's why your hands and your feet suffer, because they're at the ends of the peripheral. So your body's saying, okay, what's vital here? Emergency. Okay, let's keep keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And but if you think about years ago, someone going out to hunt or gather thousands of years ago, and they live in a cold climate, and their survival depends on hunting or gathering, they don't necessarily have the luxury of going, you know what, today, no, I'm just going to chill and watch the news, and then maybe it'll be better conditions. They've got to go. So you go out, and the body goes, okay, preserve, but you still need dexterity. You still need to be able to do stuff. So what you find is actually you have vasoconstriction, and you have this conservation. As you relax into that, there's this, the body needs to give you a little bit something. So this cycle of the blood vessels opening again, and closing, and opening and closing. And so you're almost giving some training to your circulatory system, because those blood vessels are muscular, essentially, in their function. They'll spasm and constrict, and they'll open and dilate, and so this leads to I talked about before about geroscience, aging. So, sadly, everything deteriorates with age. I'm already experiencing some of it, but your lung capacity will get lower with age, for sure. Your peak expiratory flow measure will get lower. Your VO2 max will get lower.
But it's just the rate of it, right? You can slow it down with this.
And your circulatory system, generally speaking, will deteriorate. And so the key thing is, can you make that curve shallower so that it deteriorates less? And so instead of doing if you want to train your bicep, you can do a push-up. It's more generalized, but it will help. If you do a bicep curl, it'll be more specific. If you go for a walk or a jog, it'll help your circulatory system. If you do everything.
But if you sprint,
I would suggest, and now again, I'm not a scientist, but if you do some cold exposure, it'll be a bit more specific to your circulatory system. So that's another benefit. And so I've gone a bit of a circle here, but the point was, which of these things works the best, and do they all? And I have to say, I guess that they all, to some degree, have effects in those areas in the same direction, as opposed to, it's not one is bad and one's good, but the impact will be more or less, and the not side effects as in something that's bad, but the experience of the whole thing will be a bit different, whether you go in an ice bath, a shower, or cryotherapy. So that's what I think on those.
I would also say, like, adopting that sort of mindset on a general basis has obviously not proven, but just adapting that mindset on a general basis would cross over, and you start to see benefits in other aspects of your life. Because there's this saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you are taking charge in a certain direction to improve your health, maybe that would allow you to be in the mindset of holistically changing your lifestyle and changing it in a way that you are more focused on improving your health. I've certainly seen that for myself. If you're trying to do a meditation and improve your mental health, and then you sort of try to do a holistic change, so you would, and you do require that, because Wim Hof also says, right, mindset is a very important aspect of it as well. So I feel like there's definitely a domino effect. One thing does cross over to other benefits as well, be it you taking on exercising or meditation or having an improved nutrition. So I would say just any step toward that positive direction would get you closer to other positivities as well. This is how I see it.
Yeah, and I think with that mindset thing and the mental side of it, there's always an ideal, and then there's a reality. I often think to myself, with any endeavor, it's like, okay, let's start with what is ideal.
Yeah.
Like, how would that look, or how would I do that?
Yeah.
And then you work from there as to what is possible to some degree. And thinking about those things, the perfect would be, and I'm almost certain there must be people in the world that are like this, that have achieved that state of, to use the Buddhist term, nirvana, or I don't know if that's the right, I don't know if that's the right literal word, but where people, things happen and people with equanimity can just,
non-reactive,
and just go, it is how it is, it's fine, and I will be able to, that is the ideal, that is how to be. Now, am I there? No, I hope I can get there. But I mean, it starts with what's the opposite, where everything is an absolute disaster, and you're negative about everything. Okay, so I'm not there, so that's for sure. So if I'm halfway between, great. And if I can start to push, if I can push that further and further and further, better. Keep going towards that, and
exactly.
And it might be a lifelong endeavor.
Yes, in my opinion, I personally believe that's the beauty of it. It's never ending. You can never be 100%. You can always learn to improve and not be reactive per se, physically and psychologically. And it's a never ending journey. And that's the beauty of it. Every day you can get closer and closer to it, but you're forever in the process. It's not something that you achieve and then it's over. Because you've seen like athletes as well, or world champions, their life goal is to be a world champion, and then once they get to it, and then they're like, now what? I don't know what's ahead in life.
Okay, and so if you look there, there's examples over time, and it is documented to some degree. It can be a horrific thing for people where they've been at such a high level of those things, and then when that is done, now it might be because they reached their time, or it might be because of injury, and it's cut short early, and it can be extremely challenging. Like, to take my situation of hernia and I can't do all the things like. That's an example of where my situation is trivial compared to others, because was I an elite athlete performing at height? No. And so how huge was that in my life? It was big to me, but it wasn't the same as someone who is,
it's all relative, obviously.
The top of the thing, playing American football, and then there's an injury, and then the whole thing is, what do I do now? So dealing with those sorts of challenges.
But also coming back to the most important point, at the end of the day, it is your responsibility inherently to make sure that you learn and teach yourself to deal with those things, and it's your personal responsibility to make yourself happy and stress-free, and because at the end of the day, you and me, we could be going through the same situation externally, but how that stress affects us could be drastically different, and that just comes down to what your relationship with it is, or how well trained or capable you are of coping with that stress. So certainly you will deal with stress, but it's your responsibility to deal with it. So take precautionary measures, I would say, personally.
Yeah, and I believe with that a significant part of it, in terms of ultimately how will those things turn out for any individual when they face a challenging situation, is the ability to find things. And this I take from Wim Hof Method learnings on the mindset component, and there's talk about growth and going towards something, or the opposite, which is avoiding and going away from. And it's not to say don't think about avoidance in this, but I would say if you can find things that are appealing and positive things for you, you can assess that they're good for you long term, appealing things to go towards, and then you focus on them, and you don't focus on the things which are the negative aspect. You go, okay, where can I go? What can I do? So in the case of, let's simplify it. I can't be a football player anymore. Okay, there's the negative thing. I've been dealt a bad hand here. You think about that and go, oh no, it's so bad, everything's ruined. Or you can go, just let that go and go, okay, what does remain?
So basically,
that I can go towards with energy. And I think that's where Wim Hof Method, for example, or other things that people can engage in relatively easily, which bring them a feeling, they feel good by doing them, and two, they can have a reasonable degree of confidence that it is incrementally being beneficial for them. Okay, that's a great thing you can do. And then that can assist you with, okay, can I look beyond what I was looking at before? and go further and in other areas of life with the things that I'm pursuing or trying to do.
It's kind of like stoicism, right? Just focus on what you can control, and everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? Sort of similar sort of mindset.
Where focus goes, energy flows.
Yeah,
that sort of
exactly.
thing, yeah.
And we maybe tend to focus on things that are outside our control. We always do, right? Why did this happen?
Yeah.
And this and that. And it's at the end of the day, it's just about mind, how powerful your mind is, what your perspective is, how in control you are of your mind. I find it incredibly interesting, like how powerful mind could be. Did you know, like we were talking about this the other day, that just through they did this experiment where they had two groups of people. One was in one was told to visualize picking up weights and doing weightlifting, and the other wasn't. And the one that visualized, they actually didn't touch a single weight, but they just visualized picking up weights, going through those exercises. They saw a 17% increase in muscle mass just through visualization.
Right. Okay.
Right. So this is just the start of it. Like possibilities are endless. Like your mind is.
That's amazing. I have to get some
I'll send
direction
you the
towards that. I'd like to
study.
see
I'll
that.
send
Yeah.
you this. You can look into it. But the more I get into what the mind is capable of, it just blows me away. It's quite interesting. They've also looking into this. Have you heard of Joe Dispenza?
Yes.
So have you looked into how he heals people with chronic conditions just through meditation?
I've read bits on it, but I don't know it
Yeah. So
intimately
if
well.
you look into that as well, it's very, very interesting. But certainly that's what Wiser Together is about. It's just me personally, and as we're exploring different things together. And
yeah, I've read bits and pieces which he's done a lot of stuff with people en masse as well. Like large numbers of
exactly.
people, right?
It's and the testimonials are insane. Like people, it's been life changing for them. And he refers to there's this pharmacy of chemicals within you that you just need to be learn to access, and those can provide you the necessary healing.
Really? Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
He's Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. I mean, I personally, obviously, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know much. This is just what I've read. You can go and check out Joe Dispenza. He's a neuroscientist, I believe, and he does these workshops, and he's allegedly cured or healed people with
Right.
Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. It's huge. It's huge. Uh, but yeah, last question I want to ask you, Jules, is that I personally, for me, the most inspiring thing to see in any person is them being true to their purpose and changing their purpose. And that was what truly inspired me and Wim Hof as well. You've obviously met him, and you know how energetic, charismatic, uh, just raw, unfiltered energy, right? He's just someone who's so devoted to his purpose. Like everything else is just noise, right? He's so laser focused.
Very incredible, yeah.
It's very inspiring to see, right? Certainly, you've embarked on this journey as well, where you're experimenting more with the Wim Hof method, and you've become a certified instructor now. And where do you see this going, and what do you hope to achieve from this, if anything?
Yeah, some people set very precise
goals. Yeah.
It may be precise goals in outcome and precise timeframes. Mm-hmm. And I get the case of that. And some people will argue you can't succeed unless you do that.
I disagree.
And I have through my life not done that. Now one could say, how successful am I? There's different measures of it. So maybe that's why I'm not the master of something in the world necessarily. But I feel things have gone pretty well. But I think that, so I have a strong sense of what I will best be doing and what I want to be doing. And those things coinciding with living an enjoyable and full life. And I don't have any doubts about it. So to put that in context, now it probably sounds a little bit hard to grasp, but I've worked in finance for 25 years for a large investment bank for part of it, in the investment division of it, and for a privately owned company for the last 13 years. Now, I'm not saying I wasn't. I enjoyed what I did at those places, and I value what those companies do, and it was a great experience to work there, and I enjoyed what I did. And so with this, as I've described what I'm doing now, so I've set up this business, Healthspan Fitness,
Yes,
to sort of focus on these sorts of things we've been talking about in terms of alternative methods or just methods of assisting with health and fitness. One thing that I do is Wim Hof Method sessions, and those are structured around the Wim Hof Method.
Of course, yeah.
Precisely to what those things are. I'm certified under the Wim Hof Method to run those sessions, for example. So it's partly what I talked about at the beginning. I've seen the benefits of these things. Now, I guess a good way to explain it is with the finance world, after a long time working there in the investment industry as a relationship person, as someone who holds out investments to people and says, here's a good idea for you to invest in. It's not a minor thing for someone to place their savings, their money with you. It's a big thing. And so what I've realized is, if someone came to me now, let's put it this way, if someone came to me and said, I've got this great investment for you, invest in this thing. And I could say, okay, who's running it? And how are they going to run it? So what's the approach? Why is it likely to succeed or fail? What's the probability? All these things. And all of those things, and how have they performed in the past and all that? Show me the numbers.
Yeah.
And all those things can be really beneficial and helpful. But the single most important question, I believe now, is to say, where's your money? So when the person comes to me and says, do this, I go, where's your money?
Yeah.
Do you have a significant proportion of your own personal wealth?
Do you have skin in the game?
Your family's wealth, family members, people who rely on you telling them to do this.
Yeah.
Is there significant skin in the game at risk with this? Because if there isn't, maybe it's not suitable for you and it is for me. But then I ask them massive questions.
Yeah.
Now, the same thing happens here. And earlier in the discussion, I think Anna said that movement from what I've been doing before to what I'm doing now. It is that thing. So I started to say, wow, this is so good. And I found initially it was saying, oh, I'm doing this thing to people. You should do this as well. Then I go, I want to train it. So I did the training and then I become certified. And then and I'm going, I'm doing this. This is more occupying more and more of my thinking and time and my belief, and eat your own cooking, that sort of idea.
And you like it.
Yes. And so if you've explained to yourself why this is a good thing for you to do in the investment analogy, when I joined that firm 13 years ago, I'd already sort of essentially reached that conclusion to some degree. And I said, let me look. They did one very specific approach to investing, one investment philosophy. That was it. And I said, okay, here's what I asked myself. Would I put the bulk of my own personal exposure into this? Yes or no? If it's no, just do something else.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. Because then the wind is not at your back. So do something where you've explained it to yourself. You believe, you're not just kidding yourself. You believe why it is. Then the wind is at your back.
Yeah.
And that is the same thing with this. So it's not that I don't believe in this thing anymore. Quite the contrary. What investment exposure I have is there's heavy exposure to that same firm I worked at for 13 years.
You're still involved.
It remains there.
Yeah. Offline. Yeah.
But in terms of my day-to-day, what I'm doing, I found this thing which is in a different field, which gives me huge energy to say, yes, I can 100% say this thing is helpful and beneficial.
Yeah.
And and that's where the two things come together. The scientific research and the empirical evidence is really important because it helps to verify, vindicate. People can do their own independent.
Yeah.
They listen to this biased person, me, talking about it, saying it's been wonderful. People can do their own. So that's the value of the scientific research. Then people's own experience is equally or even more important. People experience it themselves and say, wow, something good is happening here. And I've had that. And so those two things seem to me to say this is a thing that works, it's valid, it's helpful, it's beneficial to many people in many different parts, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy to do these things. And the other part is the feedback.
That's a focal point, right? Like at the core, I feel like just you knowing consciously, not even getting validation from outside, just you and yourself fully consciously believe and know that if you're doing the right thing and this can be transformational to other people's lives, that just brings you a sense of like satisfaction or happiness or peace, whatever.
And to get it wrong, I would have to do a bad job of explaining those things to people.
Yeah.
And so I have to be clear about how you explain that, and you don't over exaggerate things. You say this is how it is, but if you have an understanding of where this can be helpful, you can do that quite clearly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the feedback. I have the things I've just described. That's why I think it's good, and that's verified by the feedback from people participating. So yesterday, a gentleman did the session, and he said afterwards, I said, "Are you okay after the cold? Because you have that period where you might get some shivering and things."
Yes. Yeah.
I said, "How do you feel?" He said, "I feel absolutely wonderful." That's in itself. Now that doesn't mean it's had.
It's a personal experience, like you said. Obviously, not everything can be put into scientific.
But I've had people give me feedback after the fact later on, and it's positive, and you have people continuing to practice these things, and saying yes, this can have a positive effect, and so that's been a great thing for me.
Yeah, me certainly as well. I've done 3 sessions with you up until now, and it's been phenomenal. And I am a big advocate of the Wim Hof method as well. I do certainly recommend it to all my friends, and just getting someone to, like, a few of my friends have started taking cold showers, and obviously once you start getting into it, there's so much depth to it, and it will take years and years of devotion to researching and getting into it. But on the surface, for most people, it's just like, oh, cold shower, is this good for me? Because they don't even obviously understand the full science behind it. A normal average person doesn't. So I just recommend it to them, and then they start, and they're almost doing it unknowingly, but they sort of continue just on the basis of how they feel after, and that's positive, right? They wouldn't keep doing something just because someone else told them to. They might try it, but them continuing is in enough evidence for themselves that it's good for them. And certainly a lot of people in those positions, they care more about how they feel as to what they would read on a piece of paper. Right? Because everybody's experience is different. So I would just say try it. There's no harm trying it, and be it the breathing or the cold shower, or if you have any specific way, people should maybe consider starting.
The beauty of it is it's such a low hurdle to doing it, and it's for everyone really. It's regardless of gender, age.
If you breathe, it's for you. I guess.
Yeah. If you breathe, so and with minimal effort. So and there's varying degrees of it, right? So if you want to become a champion 400-meter runner, there's a certain set of things and regularity and extremity that you do. If you want to keep fit with the same essential emphasis on different muscles and type of fitness as a 400-meter runner would have, but without all of that, I'm just doing it to feel good. You can do that. I do it. I run around the wharf near where I live, and it's a bit longer than 400 meters, but I go to pace where it's just uncomfortable. I remember doing the 400 meters. I did it at school. I would compete with my school friend, and it was nasty. I did it because no one else wanted to do it. But but it derives a certain type of fitness, right? Now, breathing and cold exposure is different, but you can go to a more extreme thing, but you don't have to. You can go 10, 15 minutes a day of breathing practice in the comfort and the safety of your own home on a couch and lying on the bed. Right? And we emphasize, don't do these breathing practices unless you are sitting or lying down in a safe place, not driving a car, not anywhere near the water. The cold exposure is a different thing. You can go, if you have an ice bath or access to one, you can do that. Or the most simple version, a cold shower. And or if you have a tub or a bath, you can put a couple of bags of ice into it. Either way, so the most simple version would be 10 to 15 minutes of breathing a day. You can do it any time of day. The ideal is when you first wake up and you're relaxed and you don't have a full stomach. It's probably a bit more effective. And jumping into a cold shower, once a day. As you say, you could start with 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Or go in a warm shower and finish on cold, or build it up. And eventually, for most people, you start to get a thing where you go, no, I like this. It's good. And I miss it if I don't do it, that sort of thing. So it can be done very easily. And then you can go more extreme if you want to,
certainly.
You get more out of it. You feel like you'll get more out of it. But with all these things, one of Wim's sayings, and it's an important one, is never force, never force. You're not with the breathing, you're doing some specific breathing practices, and then you're doing a retention where you hold your breath. You're not saying how long can I hold my breath for? I'm trying to beat my friend or my own personal record.
It can be dangerous, if not done right.
But it's really you can have the effect that you're hoping to have, a beneficial effect, without going too ridiculous with it. Crazy.
In my experience, I refer to this analogy a lot, and I've seen it certainly in my experience and experience of other people. When they hear ice bath, instantly it's like there's a mountain in front of them they need to climb. Can't do an ice bath, and that kind of refrains them from just taking that first step as well, which may be just going as cold as you can in the shower, 5 seconds, and just start there. Forget about the mountain. But as you take that step and you see you like that step, maybe you take another one, eventually you'll get to where you are, right? And that's how it all starts. We don't overnight climb a mountain. If we keep focusing on the next step, we wouldn't be phased away or paralyzed by the mountain in front of us. And that is the wrong approach, in my opinion, when people are just looking at the final or end goal, which is doing an ice bath, maybe 2 minutes or different. It could be applied to all contexts, but if we just maybe start wherever we can, smallest step, whatever that step looks like for you, just start there, and then you see.
And something within what you said there, you touched on a really important component of it, really important part within a few of the things you said, and that is, while the first time someone does these things, it was the case for me, do the breathing, I go, wow, that was a great experience. And so we do the fundamental thing, we do the breathing and we do the cold. One of the things I'd say is the Wim Hof Method, the guidance and the framework that they get the instructors to work under, really importantly has this element of explaining the science of it, the physiology, what's going on, so people understand, right? And that's really important. Often, now I'm not denigrating these things where they happen, and it's fine and it's a fun experience, but often these things may be done, where someone will pop an ice bath in a place and say, come and do this, and it's like an experience. It's like an experience, and that's fine. And you jump in, you go, and almost it becomes, how long can I stay in for? And is it more than this other person? And you go, oh wow, it's really cold. I went to an ice bath, and you might do some breathing practice. The breathing practice almost requires a bit more explanation, I guess, but not necessarily. You can do it in a way where it's an experience, and you go, yeah. Now, why am I saying this? Because yes, you can have an immediate recognition that something about this, but the real benefit to you, I believe, certainly physiologically and almost certainly in terms of the mindset and the mental health and that sort of thing, is incremental, it's cumulative, and it builds on regular practice. So that's the point you're saying. So if you do it once and go boom, great, you've experienced it, but you hardly move the dial. Now, if you just do a little bit every single day, then the whole thing is this hormesis, this principle. The adaptations that start to happen will start to happen, but they'll only start to happen if it's done with consistency regularly. Now, it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be for ages, but just regular, consistent thing. And it's not a surprise, right? It's the same thing with general fitness. Let's say
pretty much everything.
Everything. Not even fitness. And the other thing is, a really good way to think about it is, now again, cliches are cliches for a reason, because often they're true, right? So the idea that you can go for weeks without eating, you can go only days without drinking water, and you can only go minutes or seconds without breathing. Right? And so when people start to say, okay, I want to make some changes and make myself healthy, right, or whatever it is, or live a good life, often we go to the first one, which is our diet, and we go, okay, can I do this? And it's true for a good reason, because if you eat 3 square meals a day, multiply that up for a year, it's probably 1,100, 1,200 meals in a year. Every single one of those meals is a choice. And if I eat a Big Mac Happy Meal for every single meal, it may have a good outcome or a bad outcome, but there's going to be something cumulative about that every single meal, 3 times a day for a year. And I may want or not want the path that takes me down. Now, if I have boiled chicken and steamed rice and vegetables every single day, now that has a different path. Now, there may be good and bad to each one. And maybe it's bad for me or good for me, but it has an outcome. But it's a choice. And there's going to be a cumulative effect for sure.
Compounding, basically.
From that, Now, you breathe, the average person breathes maybe 22,000 times a day, 25,000 maybe. So it's 8 or 9 million times a year. Each one of those breaths is it's subconscious, most of them. And so can we make those subconscious, train that subconscious breathing to be more functional, more effective, more optimal for me, better use of each breath? and it will have a cumulative effect. Now that's sort of exaggerating for emphasis, but if you now let's go back to the practice, the daily practice. If you're doing these things with regularity, you'll build. And I often use because I used to use it in the finance world, because it definitely applies to investing, and it applies here. The cumulative effect is Einstein saying was compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those that understand it earn it. Those that don't pay it. And it's also true here. So I'm not saying that the Big Mac meal example would result in a bad outcome for me, but let's say I do something that's detrimental to my health. I just take a pound of lard and a pound of sugar, and I eat that every day, 3 times a day for a year, and that's it. I think I'm pretty safe to say the outcome is going to be
100%
bad for me.
Certainly.
So then I'm paying compound interest,
Yeah.
and if I do something else, I'm earning it, and I believe that's the case with a moderate, sensible amount of these practices on a regular basis. You build that compound interest.
Yeah. I just think that it's not those one-off experiencing. That needs to be part of the lifestyle, your lifestyle, if you want to get the maximum amount of benefits from it. And it is a lifestyle, just like fitness. You can't go to the gym one time a year and then expect to be fit. It's a lifestyle. You need to do it consistently. Same with nutrition or better sleep or building on your relationships, or just like any other thing, right? So it's a part of your lifestyle. And a lot of people do it on that experiential level, where a one-off experiences where they do a cold shower or some ice bath, but certainly the best benefits are realized when you do it consistently and make it a part of your lifestyle in whatever capacity that's fit for you. But yeah, thank you so much, Jules. Really appreciate the time you took out for us, and we had a lovely conversation. I certainly got to learn a lot, and can say the same for Anas as well.
For sure. I mean, it was insightful, comprehensive, and I think people listening to this, I think we covered our objective. People who were alien to this entire world now would have sufficient knowledge to just start, pick up his book, um, check out the classes, check out what each type of cold exposure can, the benefits that can bring to them. So I think it was, I mean, for me as well, was immensely insightful. Thank you so much for your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anas, and thanks, Parmeet, very much for inviting me to be involved with Wiser Together. Appreciate it.
It's my honor. Lastly, I just want to thank everybody who's joined us and watching this or listening to this. Thank you for supporting us in all the way you have been, and we'll see you next Sunday. Thank you.
Ciao.